Hey guys, I know a lot of you are planning for your Camino de Santiago this spring. Some of you are planning for April or May. And so I thought I'd put out another top 5 list. This one is the top 5 things you can do to prepare for the Camino de Santiago coming up here in a couple of months. So jumping right in, the first thing you can start doing is what I've been doing, train your walking. And it takes a little while to get in shape, and you don't want to do any damage to your feet or your knees along the way. So it's important to do what's called intermittent training. And so I've been talking about this, what I've been doing the last couple of weeks. I've already dropped about 10 pounds. I just weighed myself. I'm down to 196 from, I was probably close to 210. I was pretty heavy, so my pants didn't fit. When my pants don't fit, I know I'm approaching 210. So I just weighed myself. I'm down at 196. I've been walking nearly every day for the past 2 weeks. And so today I just finished doing an 8-mile walk. And on a few days ago, I did a 12-mile, and then I followed up with a 7-mile. And then yesterday I took the day off. So intermittent means you're gonna do certain distances each day, and then you're going to take some days off in there. There's certain parts of your body that need time to recover because they're not just muscle, it's tendon. So the way I do my training is I'll do generally about 5 miles a day, 5 to 7. The loop that I do once I've sort of gotten back into the swing of things is a 7-mile. But I did start with 5 miles, and I was pretty much wiped me out just to do that. Feeling a lot of pain in my feet and exhausted. It takes about a week of that to sort of build up to where you feel okay doing 5 miles. And the way I suggest doing that is pick a destination about 2.5 miles out from your house. Maybe it's a Starbucks or another cafe, just a place where you can sit somewhere, maybe on an outside patio where you can take your shoes off after that couple of miles. And then you're going to sit and relax for about 30 minutes and let your feet sort of cool off a bit. And then you're going to walk the distance home. And so you break that up into 2 stretches. That's really how it works on the Camino. You're going to walk maybe 5 miles, maybe less if you're just getting your first cup of coffee in the morning. But you're going to walk about 5 miles at a shot, and then you're going to stop at a cafe. You're going to take your shoes off and relax and hang out with other pilgrims, which is sort of the best part of the Camino, the socializing at the cafes, sitting and relaxing and having people that you've never met before, but somehow you have everything in common with. So that's the reason I keep going back. People ask me why I keep doing the Camino Frances. That's where all the people are. That's half the people that walk the Camino. They walk the Camino Frances, and then you get about 35% that walk the Portuguese, and then the other routes are broken down into anywhere from 2, 3, or 4% for each of the routes. Like the Norte, you might get 3 or 4%, and then 2% maybe on the some of the other lesser traveled routes. So you're going to basically be walking about 5 miles at a shot, and then you take maybe 30 minutes to an hour of break, and then you walk another 5 miles, and then you got 10 miles done, and after a couple of weeks of that, you're physically in pretty good shape, and if you haven't injured yourself. So the key is make sure you're doing your training intermittently so you don't injure yourself. So I do about 5 miles a day until I'm conditioned, then I stretch it a little bit, and then one day a week I'll do something like a 10-miler. This week I did a 12 because I had the energy to do that and my feet were feeling pretty good. But usually I'll stretch it to about 10 miles. If you can do 10 miles, then you can do 15, which is a pretty long day on the Camino. The longest days, if you're following the guidebooks, is usually about 18 miles. It's about 30 kilometers, 29, 30 kilometers. But generally you'll be doing 12 to 15. And then when you get out into the Meseta, some of the distances are shorter. The towns are smaller, and so you just sort of stop where the towns are, and you end up doing some 18 kilometer, 20 kilometer, 22 kilometers, which ends up being like 10 to 12 miles. So by the time you get to the Meseta, it's pretty easy. You're in good physical condition, and the distances are shorter. So in this intermittent training, the way I do it is I'll do several days where I'm doing 5 to 7 miles. And then I might take a day off, maybe just do a little walk to the store and back, something maybe a mile or 2. And then I'll do my big one, do about a 10 miler, and then I'll take a couple of days off usually. And what you want to do, the reason is because you want your Achilles tendon to recover. That's a big problem on the Camino, is people are getting tendonitis in their Achilles, and it's just very, very difficult to walk when you've got Achilles problems. And so you want to make sure that you avoid that if at all possible. And at the first sign of trouble, you want to make sure that you're stopping, you're taking shorter distances, and you're taking time to let that recover. I've seen a lot of people end up having to quit because of their Achilles. Usually around Burgos, they go home, they just can't take it anymore. So, but that's the reason I wear the running shoes or a walking shoe rather than a hiking shoe, because the walking shoe in particular is designed to be a little bit easier on your Achilles. And especially as you get older, if you're, my age, in the mid 50s or older, we have a tendency to get that tendonitis way down where the Achilles attaches to the heel bone, and it's very painful, makes it very difficult to walk. Every step is just pain. So I've seen a lot of people quit over that. So the other area where you might find that you're having trouble, if injury-wise, on the Camino is the what's called patellar tendonitis, which is just below the kneecap in the front, and that's from either they call it jumper's knee, I think, and that's usually from on the downhill, from going too hard on the downhill, especially if you're carrying a pack that's too heavy. If you're carrying like a 20-pound pack and you've got that extra weight and you're going downhill, you don't notice it while you're doing it, but the next morning you'll feel it. It's right under the kneecap in the front, and that's called patellar tendonitis. And so you want to avoid that. And again, this is the reason I suggest not, when you are doing your training, that you don't need to really climb mountains. The muscles you're using for that hard climbing are the big muscles in your legs, in your upper legs, and those aren't really susceptible to the tendonitis. Those won't end your Camino usually unless you slip and tear something. The things that'll end your Camino are the Achilles tendonitis and the patellar tendonitis. Those are, or blisters if you get really bad blisters. So wear the right shoes, wear running shoes or walking shoes, something nice and soft and light, and don't overtrain. Take those couple of days off each week so that your tendons can recover and you don't show up to the Camino injured. So that's number one, walking training, intermittent. Item number two to prepare for the Camino is break in your shoes. You want to get them broken in. You want to make sure they're not going to give you any trouble, but you don't want to overdo it and take too many miles off their lifespan. So usually I can get at least 500 miles out of a pair of running shoes after they've been sort of broken in a little bit. I've used several different brands. Ultras tended to get shredded quite a bit in the inside of the heel. The fabric inside of there, the two Caminos I did in Ultras got pretty badly shredded, so they didn't hold up very well. So I was not too disappointed to let those go and switch to Brooks. Brooks have held up amazingly well. I get to the end and they're just barely worn on the inside, and I accomplish that by not only are they a pretty well-made shoe, but I also keep them nice and clean. I wash them when they're dirty. I get all the dust out, and because they're just lightweight running shoes, they dry really quick. I stand them up against the wall somewhere to let the water sort of drain out the toe, and by morning they're basically dry. So that's how I make my shoes last. So you want to break in your shoes, but not so much that you've cut the lifespan in half. You just want to make sure that they're nice and soft and broken in and not going to give you any blisters. Item number three is electronics. So there's certain things you want to take care of before you go. One is to check if you need any kind of visas. Most of the people that you see on the Camino don't need a visa. There's a lot of people that are already from Europe, so they don't need it. Here in the U.S., we don't need it. You get a visa on arrival for Europe. The change this year, as of January, and they'll make it a hard stop on at the end of February, is the UK has their ETA, electronic travel authorization program, and if you're planning on routing anywhere through the UK, either to catch a connecting flight or in any way at all, you need that ETA. Because you're going to have to go through passport control. If you land at Gatwick and you need to catch a flight down to Biarritz, you're going to be entering the UK and then flying into the EU. So you're going to have to go through passport control coming from the US into into the London area, and you need that ETA. So take care of the ETA. I already did a video on that, and a few days ago. Mine was instant. I did it through the app on the phone, and it came back. It took me 5 minutes to do the application, less than 5, and it came back instantly approved. So get that done. Something else you're going to want to do is notify your bank that you're going to be traveling. If you use some of the banks, like most of the major banks have some sort of authorization on their app where you can notify them that you're going to be traveling, so that when you land at the airport in Europe, that you can use the ATM machines. I don't get any currency ahead of time. You don't need to. You don't need to get euros at your bank here and have them available. You really shouldn't be carrying too much cash on you. I never carry more than 100 euros. And you do want to carry a little bit, though, because there are albergues in the Meseta particularly that don't take cards. So you need to have cash to be able to pay them. Sometimes the ATM can be a bit sketchy. I have had a couple of instances where it ate my card, and luckily there was somebody inside. I try to stick with ATM machines that are attached to a bank branch where there are people inside, because if it eats your card and doesn't give it back for some reason, they can go right in and retrieve it for you. And that's the way I had to do it the couple of times that I had a problem. The reason you would have a problem with your ATM card being taken is because it's a banking holiday here. There's a couple of holidays that come up during the season where I don't remember what is it, Memorial Day maybe, during that time of year, and so the banks here may be closed and they can't get the authorization, and so it spits it back at you and says you can't do this, and I've put it back in to try it again, and then it just ate the card. So I had that happen. So notify your bank that you're going to be traveling. You can do it usually through your banking app. You're going to go and it'll say travel notices, and you're just going to put the countries where you're going to be traveling, the estimated dates that you're going to be there, and then it will usually just work right when you get there. So you'll arrive at the airport. There's always an ATM machine in the airport. You grab yourself 100 euros, and you're good to go. The other thing you're going to want to do is download the apps that you need to navigate the Camino. So there's like the Buen Camino app. If you use an iPhone, you might prefer Camino Ninja. There's booking.com. So make sure you have all these accounts set up before you get there, so that you can go on your booking app and you don't have to set up a new account with them while you're standing there trying to find a cell signal or some Wi-Fi. You want to make sure that you have it all set up in advance. The ones that I typically have installed are booking.com, and I only use that if I'm going to be going to an area where I know it's going to be a bit of a bottleneck, or there's not enough. There's typically not enough beds. Zubiri might be one. Hornios is another one where that there's only so many beds, and there's going to be a lot more people coming, and it's going to be full. Where I might book it in advance. The other way I would do it is to just use the Buen Camino app and start shooting out emails to the the hosts of the albergue, and they'll respond back and usually confirm a reservation, or they'll tell you that they're full. So I use booking.com. Sometimes I use Airbnb if I go to, let's say I'm in Burgos and I want something like an apartment as opposed to a regular hotel. I might be better off using Airbnb. They've improved. They went through a period of time where there was a lot of surprise charges on Airbnb, and I stopped using it for several years. The Airbnb was one of the first ones that I used on one of my very first trips to Spain, and I was down in Spain and Morocco, and used Airbnb to get a room down in the old Medina in Marrakesh, and that was I was on the train coming from Casablanca to Marrakesh, had no idea where I was going, and I just was able to secure a room in the old Medina. But they did go through a few years where they had surprise cleaning charges, but I think they've gotten that under control, and now there's a button on there that says that all of the charges are included in the price that they are showing. So I'm much more comfortable using Airbnb. So Booking, Airbnb, Buen Camino, or Camino Ninja, those are the apps, and And then the other thing that you might want to do is download the Google Maps for Spain along that Camino route, because sometimes you just don't have a signal, and you sort of want to know, if you miss one of the markers, which I've done a couple of times, even though I've been there, so many times now. It's easy to get distracted. You're listening to music or you're taking pictures, and you miss the turn, in the middle of a field somewhere, and you get a mile out of your way, and you need to find a different route. And you're in the middle of no place. There's no Wi-Fi. Cell signal might be weak. It's good to have that Google map already downloaded so that you have access to figure out how to get out of there. And so you want to download that Google map. Okay, number 4, decrease your caffeine intake if possible. If you have to have, so many cups of coffee in the morning to be functional, sometimes on the Camino, there's not always coffee available. You might be staying at a place that doesn't have much of a kitchen. I know in where is it? I think it's in Roncesvalles, where they have vending machines and I think microwaves, but there's not really much there. You have to sort of wait till the cafe's open. And if you wanted to get an early start at 6 a.m., whatever, the cafe doesn't open till 7. I know the one that I go to that's on the way to not Zubiri, but Bergete. It's about 3 kilometers out. It opens at 7 a.m. So if you're the kind of person who's irritable, if you don't get your caffeine in you, the second you wake up, you kind of want to wean yourself off of that. Start a few months ahead, just adding decaf coffee to your normal coffee supply. So each day when you have your coffee, you'll scoop out whatever you scoop out, add back in a little decaf, a scoop of decaf, and then mix that all in so that little by little you're slowly weaning off of the caffeine. And that way when you get to the Camino, it won't be as big of a deal. You can sort of muddle through until you find a cafe. And you really want to be getting to the point where it just doesn't bother you. And that actually brings me to my final number 5 thing that you can do to prepare for the Camino de Santiago is mental preparation. So you want to practice, you want to rehearse, just like an actor learning their lines, you want to rehearse your response to situations that don't go as planned. When you show up in Saint Jean Pied de Port, imagine your reservation has been lost, your bed has been given away. How are you going to react to that? Are you going to be the bad seed that starts, ranting and raving and, kicking backpacks around and yelling at the host of the pension that lost your reservation? We call it a bad seed in sales because you infect everyone around you. And you don't want to be that person. You want to be the person that just sort of shrugs and says, oh, okay. Where's the municipal? And you just go, and it's all fine. You're going to stay in a lot of disappointing facilities, and you'll stay in some very nice, surprisingly nice ones where the price was still good, but it was, wow, this is a nice place, and it was only $12. So you'll have a lot of those, but you'll have some disappointing ones where you didn't get the bottom bunk. You ended up on the top bunk. I had one where I sort of lost my cool because I wasn't mentally prepared, when my son and I were there, and I got there, I checked in, gave her my passport, did all the check-in. My son was already showered and everything, and I told the girl, I'm going to sit here in the bar and grab something to eat, and then I'll go to my bed. And she said, okay. And then by the time I had a quick, bite and a drink, I went back to her and said, which bed am I in? She goes, oh, I gave your bed away. She forgot that she'd already checked me in. I'd already paid for it. So anyway, that kind of stuff happens, and you really need to practice because it's easy to lose your cool, and you don't want to be the person that sort of ruins everybody else's experience because somebody kept you awake all night from snoring. And there's going to be those situations. You want to mentally prepare for that in the weeks and months leading up to the Camino, where again, in sales, we called it like water off a duck's back. You just let it roll off of you. It's very difficult to do if you're not prepared, because you want that. This is your Camino you've dreamed about for years. It's got to be perfect. And you're going through situations where you're trying to get flights that get you to the connecting flight, and everything's just barely stitched together. And it's just much easier if you can practice. The one successful instance I had was on the last Camino where I had a connecting flight. I don't normally book those connecting flights like that. Normally I would fly right into Paris, and then I would have my bed at the same place I always stay, the same hostel. It would already be pre-booked in advance because I know that it fills up, and I know that that's the place I want to stay. It's the cheapest place to stay near the Montparnasse train station where I need to get to the next day. But normally I don't try to put together connecting flights because you never know what's going to happen. You're going to take a 10-hour flight, and then you got a couple hours in between, and then you got to get to another flight, and you got to work your way through passport control and all that, and anything could go wrong. And so I don't normally do that. I normally just stay the night or whatever. I just don't like to base it on that. But the last time, the flight got in on time, but then the connecting flight was delayed by an hour. Then it was delayed by another hour. Then it was delayed by 2 more hours. And so I just grabbed a nice quiet spot at the far end of the airport on the floor and tried to take a little nap. And instead of getting to the Biarritz airport at 8 in the evening, I got there at midnight. And we were the last flight in, and they close that airport. It closes at night. So they kick you out. You can't just hang out and have a coffee and, sort of sleep on the chairs. They kick you out. And so you're out in the cold, and all the taxis are gone. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just get the Wi-Fi, because I was going to do the eSIM when I landed. I was testing a different system. Instead of using Google Fi like I always do, I was going to use eSIM when I got there. And so I'm getting ready to do that, and they flip off the Wi-Fi. So not only did they turn off all the lights in the airport, they locked all the doors, they kicked us out in the cold, they turned off the Wi-Fi, and I didn't have a cell signal because I hadn't set up my eSIM yet, and I didn't have Wi-Fi. So I'm standing in front of the airport. There's no taxis anywhere. Everybody's gone home. And I'm looking for a place to stay, and luckily somebody else was there with me waiting for their taxi. I said, "Is there any chance I can split the taxi with you, and you can just get me into town where I can find a bed somewhere?" And then we went into Bayonne, we went into Biarritz, the resort area by the beach, and the beds were $300 a night. For anything that was open that could check me in. There were no hostels or anything that were going to check me in. It ended up being like 2 a.m. by the time I got there. So, and I was going to catch a 6:30 a.m. train to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. So it just wasn't worth paying $300 for, 4 hours of bad sleep. So I went and grabbed a park bench and slept on a park bench. That's where I did that. But had I not mentally prepared for that, it could have been a disaster. So anyway, mental preparation. Rehearse how you're going to deal with things when they do go wrong, because they will go wrong, and you don't want to be the bad seed. So that's it. That's my top 5 things to do to prepare for the Camino de Santiago this spring, and I'll see you guys there.